Hello, Rob Curtis here, and you're listening to Marketing Unzipped, where we strip away the complexity and get to the core of what actually works in all things digital marketing. You know what's fascinating? Every day I talk to business owners and marketers who are absolutely drowning in content. They're pumping out blogs, recording videos, posting on socials, but something's always missing. Their content is not converting, and their audience isn't engaging. And it starts to make you think, is it worth all the effort? But here's the thing. Content marketing right now isn't just about creating more stuff. If you're still thinking that way, you're playing a game that stopped many years ago. The real question isn't how can we create more content? It should be how can we create content that actually matters? In today's episode, we're going to do something different. Instead of just throwing more tactics at you, we're going to build something together, a content marketing strategy that's designed for the way people actually consume content. So we're going to look at a step-by-step framework for building a content strategy that converts. Why Search Everywhere Optimisation is beginning to replace traditional SEO, the evolution of video content, and why short doesn't always mean better. And it wouldn't be an episode without me talking about a little bit of AI. And then last but not least, we know I love the metrics, but we'll look at some of those metrics that actually matter. And a little spoiler here, they're probably not the ones you're tracking. So let me give you a hint of what's to come. We're going to challenge some of the most common content marketing advice you've been hearing. We'll look at why publishing more content might actually hurt your results and why traditional content calendar approach might be holding you back. So if you're ready to move beyond the basic post more content advice and develop a strategy that actually drives results, you're definitely in the right place. The aim of this episode isn't just to be theory. I want you to walk away with some actionable frameworks and practical steps that you can implement right after you listen. So let's start by breaking down something fundamental, how to build a content strategy that stands out. And trust me, this isn't your define your audience, create content calendar advice. I want to go a lot deeper than that. As I mentioned earlier, the amount of different businesses that I've worked with and had the pleasure of just having conversations with that aren't clients of ours, from business owners, marketers, and just people looking to grow in whatever they're doing. But everyone seems to think their content challenges are unique. And I've noticed something pretty interesting. The businesses that succeed with content marketing aren't necessarily the ones with the biggest budgets or the most resources. They're the ones that understand the fundamentals deeply. So let's talk about what content strategy really means. It's not just about creating content calendars or following best practices anymore. The game's changing. Think about yourself, how you would consume content. When was the last time you read an entire article without skimming? When did you last watch a long video without checking your phone? I know that's my guilty pleasure. It's I can watch YouTube and TikTok at the same time. But the way that people interact with this content is just evolved, and our strategies need to evolve too to reflect that. So here's what really matters. First, we need to think about the intent alignment. So every piece of content needs to serve a specific purpose in your customer's journey. Generic content doesn't quite cut it. It's nice to have this evergreen content that when sometimes that creativity isn't there, but when you align your content with specific customer intentions, you create more meaningful connections and ultimately, what do we all want? To drive better results. Secondly, we have value density, and this is crucial. It's not about how much content you create, it's about how much value you pack into each piece. Sometimes one comprehensive, well-researched piece can outperform 20 superficial pieces of content. And third, there's strategic sequencing. This is something most businesses get wrong. They create great content, but present it in the wrong order. Think about it like a conversation. You wouldn't start a first date by talking about marriage, but your content needs to follow a logical progression that matches your audience's journey. If they haven't heard of you as a brand before and you're trying to ram a solution down their throat, they don't even know they've got the problem yet. We need to help them think about those steps. So let's get crystal clear on your content mission. Forget those wishy-washy kind of mission statements that apply to every business up and down the country. I'm talking about the answering 3 specific questions that most businesses never properly consider. So firstly, who are you genuinely creating content for? And I'm not talking about the broad categories like small business owners. That's far too vague. I want you to be precise. What kind of business owner, what sector, what stage of growth are they in? What keeps them awake at night? Secondly, what transformation are you promising them? And this is crucial. What's the genuine before and after story you're offering? And how different will their life or business be after engaging with your content? And thirdly, and this is one most people miss, why should they believe you can deliver this transformation? What makes you uniquely qualified to guide them through this journey? So let's make up an example. Here's an example of a week content mission. We create helpful digital marketing content for small businesses. It's not terrible, but it's about as specific as saying you're somewhere in Europe. Now, here's what a strong content mission sounds like. We create practical, step-by-step marketing guides for e-commerce store owners in the UK doing 100K to 500K a year in annual revenue, helping them scale to their first million through automated marketing systems that work whilst they sleep. Do you see the difference? The second one is so specific that it automatically tells you what content to create, and perhaps more importantly, what content to ignore early. Treat it like your sat nav. It's giving you that direction. But having a clear mission ultimately is just the beginning. We want to start thinking about what's actually working in your current content. And this is where most businesses go completely wrong. So before we start building anything new, we need to know what's actually working in your current content. Here's where most content audits go completely wrong. They focus on vanity metrics like the page views or social shares. They start judging a restaurant solely by how many people look at the menu rather than how many actually come in and eat. So instead, you want to examine 3 specific things, and I mean really examine them. First, which pieces of content have directly led to sales in the last 6 months? Not just views, not just engagements, but proper money in the bank. We need to follow the money because ultimately that's what keeps your business growing. Second, which topics generate the most questions from your audience? This is pure gold because questions reveal gaps in understanding that your content needs to address. That shows you so plain and simply exactly what your audience needs more clarity or support with. And third, where are people dropping off in your content journey? So these drop-off points, I know you've heard about the mapping the customer journey before. I know I've talked about bits of that already, but we're going to approach it today slightly different. So instead of just focusing on that standard awareness, consideration, decision framework, we're going to map it based on the questions your customers are actually asking. This is a process I love to integrate, particularly with our SEO clients, and where obviously that process of SEO has evolved so much, we get to hone in on these, focusing on what our customers' challenges, questions, concerns, queries. How can we address that in the right process? So first, we've coined it as the question bank. So think of it as literally a Google Doc, a notepad, a couple of Post-it notes, whatever works right for you. But think of it as a living document that captures every single meaningful interaction with your audience. We gather every question from your customer service emails. I mean, every single one of those, not just the common ones. We collect questions from your sales calls, including those seemingly random queries that come up during conversations, dive into your social media comments, including the tough ones that you might prefer to ignore. And this is what we do, the slightly radical, let's say. Instead of organizing those questions by the standard funnel stages, so top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, tofu, mofu, bofu, and all that, what we can actually start thinking about is how we organize them by emotional state. And this is absolutely crucial. So when we look at a customer's questions closely, they typically fall into 4 emotional states. First, there's the frustration state. These are the people that are asking, why isn't my current solution working? You can hear the exasperation in their voice. They're tired of cobbling together tools, processes, product sizes, so many different things. And they're just tired of things falling through the cracks. Then comes the skepticism state. So these are people asking, how do I know this will actually work? They've been burned before, potentially. They've tried other solutions or bought certain products that promised the world and delivered a best of postcard. They need more than just promises. They need proof. Next is the overwhelmed stage. These are people asking, where do I even start? They know they need to change. Even just contemplating the idea, it's enormous. They're paralyzed by options, by complexity, by fear of making the wrong choice. And finally, there's the validation stage. And these are people asking, am I making the right choice? They're ready to move forward, but they need that final confidence boost. If you've listened to any episodes of mine previously, I use that language of kicking them off the ledge. What can we help them here with to kick them off the ledge? So when you've organized your content strategy around these emotional states, something remarkable happens. Instead of creating generic awareness content about features and benefits, you create content that specifically addresses each emotional state. For the frustrated, you create content about breaking free from inadequate products, solutions, services. For the skeptical, you share proof. For the overwhelmed, you create step-by-step implementation guides. And for those seeking validation, develop comparison tools, decision frameworks to help them finalize that step. And this brings us to something equally powerful. We've coined as, I do love a quote, but the content pillar paradox is where most businesses go completely wrong with their content strategy. And understanding it will transform how you think about content creation. What we commonly see is most businesses try and create content pillars based on their products or services, which is understandable. And it's a place to start, but there's so much more we can do. It's a little bit like trying to sell a drill by talking about its specifications when what people really want is a hole in their wall, right? So instead, we can start thinking about how we build content pillars based on the transformations your audience wants to achieve. So let's run through that one really quick. So think about a coaching practice. The traditional approach straight away would be create content pillars around services, business strategy, financial planning, leadership development, and so on. That's not how your potential clients think. In this instance, they're not lying awake at night thinking about a business strategy as a concept. What they're actually thinking about are transformations. They're thinking about moving from being an overwhelmed solopreneur to becoming a confident business leader. They're thinking about shifting from feast and famine revenue to predictable, sustainable growth. They're thinking about transforming from an accidental boss to become an inspiring leader. And these transformations become your content pillars. And here's why this approach is so powerful. When you structure your content around transformations rather than topics, you naturally create content that resonates on a much deeper level. You're not just sharing information anymore. You're telling a story that your audience sees themselves in. So think about it this way. Would you rather read an article about the importance of financial planning or one about how to stop worrying about money and start growing your business? They are definitely going to cover very similar ground, but one speaks to a transformation that business owners desperately want to achieve. And this shift in approach changes everything about how you create content. It changes the headline you write, the examples you use, the stories you tell. But most importantly, it changes how your audience responds to your content. Because when you're speaking to the transformation they want, rather than the service you provide, you create an emotional connection that no feature list or benefit statement will ever match. So there's a couple of bits in there around that, the fundamental piece of that content pillar paradox. But I want to share some unconventional strategies that most content marketers we don't talk about a lot. You could coin these as the hidden pillars of the content strategy. These approaches might feel a bit counterintuitive first, but they're often the difference between content that just exists and content that drives real results. So straight away, think about productive controversy. Don't worry, I'm not talking about being controversial just for the sake of it. We're not trying to create social media drama here. This is something much more powerful than that. Think about the last time you read a piece of content that actually changed your perspective on something. I bet it wasn't bland, middle of the road article that agreed with everything you already believed. It was probably something that challenged your thinking, that made you uncomfortable in a productive way. So you're probably thinking, that's great, Rob. How do I implement it? So firstly, identify the accepted wisdom in your industry. So the things you take for granted on a day-to-day basis because you're in the thick of it, you know it like the back of a hand. But then look for the gaps, the inconsistencies, the places where that conventional wisdom might be failing your customers. And then finally, create content that just directly challenges these assumptions. But the crucial part of that is back that up with solid data and real insights. That can be opinion-led, but have something tangible to back that up with. The second hidden pillar, think of it as reverse chronology planning. So this is going to sound weird at first, especially when I can't pronounce it, but stay with me. Instead of planning your content calendar from today forward, start 18 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years into the future and work backwards. So I'm going to say 18 months straight off the bat. We can ask 3 crucial questions. What conversations do you want to own in 18 months? What will your competitors wish they had started talking about a year ago? And what emerging trends can you spot that nobody in your industry is discussing yet? I remember many years ago, I was sat in an office space with a good friend of mine in the SEO space, and we were talking about machine learning and AI. And believe me, I wish I talked about it more then. But it's a great example of, oh, this is a discussion. We should think what becomes of it. You don't know. And that third hidden pillar, coined as content archaeology. So everyone is obsessing over the latest trends, and that's common and that's okay, but that can't be everything you're talking about. Dig into the past, but not in the way you might expect. So for each of your core topics, look for the analog situations in completely different fields. So want to explain a complex software? Study how the best cookbook authors break down complex recipes. Need to make financial concepts more engaging? Examine how the best Museum curators tell stories about artifacts. The fourth pillar of mine is the intentional gaps. Instead of trying to create content about everything in your field, deliberately choose the topics you won't cover. When you try to be an authority on everything, you can kind of end up being memorable for nothing. Instead, identify the specific areas where you can add that unique value and be comfortable and proud and completely transparent about the things you don't cover. This level of honesty builds more trust with your audience than pretending to be an expert in everything. The fifth pillar, friction mapping. So instead of just creating content about the logical steps in your customer's journey, go back and map out that emotional and psychological barriers that prevent them from taking action. This means addressing the real reasons people hesitate, their fears, doubts, and uncertainties, not just their logical objections. So the hidden pillars might seem a bit rogue, let's say, a bit risky. Where we are in the current world with AI, it's so much more interesting for your users to consume your content with these unconventional approaches that will actually make you stand out. Something I want to talk about as well is content marketing almost of old, or that language of content marketing. Lots of people align it with blog content on your website. Lots of other people align it with social media marketing. Lots of other people align it with, my email marketing. What I think we're truly missing out on is how we all bring that together. And for me, when I think about my own journey in marketing, the content marketing conversation was an evolution from SEO. And for me, I think that even just that process of SEO now and how it's transferred from search engine optimization to language I've definitely pinched from somewhere, I can't remember where, but search everywhere optimization. It's a bit of the new frontier in how users are engaging with different platforms and treating them as search engines. I think this is a massive shakeup in that process of SEO because Google has dominated this space for such a long time. But the reason you need to be existing in places like YouTube, TikTok, is because, and even Reddit is an example, and other social channels, your LinkedIn for that professional insights perspective, for example, and even voice search again. It's kind of making a bit more noise in the recent sort of murmurs of the world. But the reality is that where we are in the world at the moment, this search process is happening everywhere all the time across multiple platforms. And each of these platforms has its own algorithm, or algorithms, as most of them do, its own content preferences and its own user behaviors. What works on one platform completely fails on the other. If you see that of you publish content, the same piece of content on different channels, you'll see wins in some areas and no result, just the fact you exist there on others. It's like every platform speaks its own language, and we need to become multilingual in our content approach. And this is, as I just mentioned, that process around creating your content and skinning it and just replicating it across every site. I understand the time and energy effort in that, or you may be leaning your efforts heavily towards one or two platforms, which if you're growing and learning in this space, yes, build this up progressively. It's not you have to go and create all these things overnight, but the creme de la creme would be you want to be able to create content that's speaking the right language on the right platforms to help you get your point across. So instead of just trying to make that one piece of content work everywhere, we need to think about the platform native content. And this means understanding the unique characteristics of each platform. So straight away, we see at the moment LinkedIn's beginning to get excited by video, but they're very keen on the longer form thought leadership pieces, carousel content, and the engagement and conversation piece on LinkedIn. So like TikTok, for example, albeit they're obviously stretching out their video content now to allow you to upload 10 minutes or 20 minutes, I think it's leaning to now. But TikTok absolutely excels at the 30-second explanations, the tips and hacks, the behind the scenes, the story, the quick engagement pieces, as we will see on content creators on TikTok that do so well. Even that first second hook, it is what can I do to grab your attention? YouTube, another great example. For me here, I love my YouTube life. There's not many things I don't YouTube these days. Thinking of how we can offer information to our customers or to our clients, that detailed tutorial content, comprehensive guides and industry deep dives. And then you've got the whole other ecosystem of things like podcast recording, video recording, and distributing that content on these channels. There's so many different areas to it, but with that general philosophy with YouTube generally, aside from YouTube Shorts, I'd include that with TikTok. It's that long form approach. I'm here to learn something. I'm here to delve. I want to really get into this information. Whilst Instagram is such a visual storytelling. I feel more emotional almost with Instagram content than TikTok. And obviously it's user generated, just like TikTok. But I just find that my wife would probably say the aestheticness of that process is how it leans in a lot more to your almost like culture and lifestyle content. You see brands like Gymshark, I feel they do more storytelling on Instagram, and then their TikTok content will be more short, quick, snappy pieces that get the direct message to the user. So you can see straight away there, and I've not even talked about different search channels and paid versus organic and all these sorts of pieces, but you can see straight away even the small nuances. And we have to think about ultimately how we optimize for all these platforms. For me, it starts with understanding three core elements of modern search. First, we have to think about intent mapping. So we need to understand what people are actually searching for on each platform. So for example, TikTok users can often search how to, what is. LinkedIn users may look for strategy and insight. YouTube users could look for a tutorial, the reviews, and Instagram could be ideas or inspiration. Then we've got to think about the format optimization. So each platform has its own content sweet spots. My best piece of advice with this is you need to go and engage with the platforms, go and browse. Go and see what's working. Go and look at, not even industry relevant, but just go and look at content creators on each of these platforms and see what they're doing. So, because the second this podcast is listened to, these sort of numbers of for the formatting and timing optimization will be completely out the window, I'm sure. But TikTok, you're kind of talking 20 to 30, I think 21 to 34 seconds with quick cuts and quick transitions. Whereas YouTube, it could be something from on average about 7 to 15 minutes. Carousel on Instagram, you could be having carousel posts of quite long, so 6, 7, 8 slides. And then LinkedIn, for example, a great win in there is the 1,500 word article pieces. And there's so many different areas with that. But yeah, I just encourage you to think about, if you can't do them all, you have to think what's most right and practical, lean into where you believe your customers are, and then look to evolve out into the others. And then third, we have platform-specific SEO and how each platform ranks content differently. So TikTok is going to prioritize things like the watch time and engagement. YouTube really values the click-through rates and then the retention of somebody watching that video. Instagram's been quite a fan of things like the saves and shares. And then LinkedIn, again, is another example. It will reward some of those more professional credibility signals. But even thinking about when you create content, we can see, even just from my own socials, I see how it's great that my friends, let's say, like my content, but actually when they comment, it serves it so much better. So if anybody's listening that does like my stuff, always comment. No, I'm teasing. But again, that process there it's about deciphering what's right. And for me, it does excite me. I appreciate I've gone off on a little bit of a SEO tangent here, but it's really prevalent when we think about the process of what we need to go and create, right? Because we're seeing this emergence of ambient search. And this is where content discovery happens naturally. So without that explicit search. So think about the voice assistants suggesting, even in Google, did you mean, or people also asked searches and things like that. Even your smart devices at home anticipating the information needs, and even AI creators building more personalized content feeds on somebody's website you're on and things like that. And this shift is fundamentally changing how we think about content discovery. It's no longer about ranking for specific keywords in this instance, but it's about being present and valuable in the moments when your audience needs you most. And this evolution, how people discover content, is directly tied to our next topic, where I'm just going to chat some more about video content. It's not just about creating videos, it's about understanding how different video formats serve different discovery purposes. So now you've understood, or you've at least listened and taken some notes around how content discovery has evolved. Let's get a look in this video content. Because here's the thing, while everyone's rushing to create shorter and shorter content, I'm seeing something fascinating happen beneath the surface. At the moment, we're seeing a fascinating split in video consumption patterns. Short form content is huge for discovery and awareness, but actually driving conversions. The data that we've seen tells a completely different story. So let me run through that process of how we can get to that. So think about how you consume your video content yourself. So you'll be in the TikTok scroll or whatever, and you watch that 30-second video to discover the new product or idea, service, whatever it is. But when you're actually considering a purchase or trying to learn something more complex, you're going to spend 15, 20 minutes watching an in-depth explanation or demonstration. That's why I always think during COVID, I think we were all sick of webinars, but they're still accessible, available, and valuable because we still need that validation layer. And I think that's a great step. And those shorter videos might get more views and much more engagement, but longer videos often drive more meaningful engagement and conversations. And it's not about choosing one length over another. It's about understanding the purpose of each format in your content ecosystem. So instead of thinking about video in terms of length, we need to think about it in terms of purpose. So if you think about a video value matrix, first of all, we have the discovery content. This could be 15 to 60 seconds. And the purpose here is to grab attention and spark interest. This is where you'll create quick tips, intriguing stats or facts, behind the scenes glimpses that build connection and relationship, and more of that emotional story hook that draws people into your brand. Then we come to engagement content running 2 to 5 minutes. And this content builds connection and demonstrates expertise. And this could be things such as process demonstrations that share your knowledge, detailed tips and tutorials that provide the real value, industry insights that position you as an expert, explanations of complex concepts in accessible ways. And for places like this, that's a lovely spot to drop in those lead magnets and value adds as well. And then lastly, we have that conversion content, and this could run 10 to 20 minutes. And this content drives decision-making and sales through things like in-depth product demonstrations, comprehensive problem-solving guides, detailed explanations of your methodology, and those expert discussions that showcase deep expertise. As you can see, there's a process there that we need to think about how we can take that user on the journey. It's absolutely brilliant if you're creating some fantastic discovery content that engages your audience, but if we're not giving them a path to walk down, where are they going? What are we asking them to do next? There's also then the technical side of video content, because it's not just about the length, it's about how we're creating and optimizing these videos for the maximum output. So firstly, then there's that adaptive formatting. We're creating what I call responsive video content. This means one video shoot can produce vertical formats for mobile platforms, horizontal formats for traditional platforms, square formats for social feeds. The list is endless. Interactive formats for web embedding. Then we even have smart captioning. We go beyond the basic subtitles, and modern video content needs to have multi-language captioning, context-aware sort of text highlights, and things like that, and motion-based caption styling. So again, depending on the brand who you are, if you're adding captions to, say, your social content, is it actually helping us demonstrate the point, or does it just look like the subtitles on the telly? And this is a really big place here where the tech can win in this, because ultimately we can, like how I record these podcasts, we film these all go on YouTube, and then we skin that content, we cut it up, and we pick that into short form bits. And then we may have a section of this content where I talk for a couple of minutes about a topic. And then that's our middle part of that whole process, of which then we can split into all of these different elements that work right for us. And obviously with our team and creating even static images, I'm talking away. So you've got my words that will then look at creating things like LinkedIn carousel content and all of these sorts of things. So it just opens up the opportunity to give, as Matt, our head of creative, certainly says, it gives it more legs, just like Forrest Gump. It's for those that love Forrest Gump reference. And Lieutenant Dan, bless him. But the one thing you must remember, all the technical optimization, everything I've just talked about, it means nothing if we lose the human element. If I'm honest, the point of this process is all about building authenticity, and that will consistently outperform the high production value piece. So think about educational videos you find most useful. They're often not the most polished ones, but rather than the ones where someone knowledgeable speaks directly to you, explaining complex ideas in a way that makes sense. That's because audiences now value expertise and authenticity over the perfect lighting and flawless delivery. So again, you can just pick up your iPhone and record. If it's great content, it will go somewhere. People will like it. People will engage with it. If it's not right, people won't, and you'll learn and you'll improve. Your next piece of content won't be focusing in that topic, that subject. You'll be engaging and getting that feedback live to you, which is the best way for you to learn. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, I couldn't not mention his infamous trending letters A and I. And so let's talk about how we can use AI in revolutionizing this content creation journey that we're on. And as I always say this, I feel whenever I talk about AI, it's not just asking ChatGPT to create a blog about a keyword to convert customers. I want to dive into how AI is actually transforming, or at least showing the signs of transforming content marketing in ways that most business owners, we haven't even thought about yet. But one thing I find really fascinating about the AI in content marketing When we're having these conversations, people either love it or they loathe it. And either they're completely avoiding it because they think it will make their content sound robotic, or they're using it like a magic wand and expecting it to solve all their content problems. But sadly, the truth is both of those approaches are missing the point entirely. Think about AI as a powerful research assistant and strategic advisor. And it is by no means a replacement for human creativity. When you shift your perspective that way, everything changes. So let me show you how that can work. So if we think about it as like 3 layers of an AI content strategy. Firstly, we want to think about that strategic insight. So this is the data part. This is the opportunity for us to share data with our chosen AI platforms, but we can use that to analyze patterns and uncover insights that's going to take us ages to sit and scroll through spreadsheets X, documents Y. We can use AI to analyze customer conversions, support tickets, competitor content positioning, the market trends, emerging topics, and even content performance patterns. So listen to the podcast about metrics and monitoring data. You can download your Google Analytics data and ask it questions. What pages are performing? What pages aren't? The power in this, it isn't just what AI spits out and gives you and what it writes, but it's what it discovers, as it can identify patterns in how your audience talks about their problems, spots gaps in your competitors' strategies, and even help you identify emerging trends before they become obvious to everyone. And then that second layer, that creative ideation. This is your colleague now. We've gone from the strategic advisor. This is your teammate. Think of it like that, just brainstorming partner. We're not asking AI to create the final piece of content, but rather to help us think about content in new ways. So use AI to generate unexpected angles on common topics, create content frameworks based on high-performing pieces, identify gaps in the content landscape. So here is my website sitemap. These are all the URLs. These are all the page titles. Or even, here's these 10 pages of content. Here is the physical documents I've uploaded from Google Docs or something. Tell me what I'm not talking about. What topics could I include in here? And even bounce ideas off in that process. So like testing, okay, I want to change the headline of my ad copy from X to Y, or give me 10 variations of that. Because again, by having that, let's call it conversation, the feedback you'll get will help you on another step. It will help you move the needle and help you be better for next time. And it's just like having a creative partner in your pocket who's read everything you've ever written in your industry and can help you spot new opportunities and approaches. And then that final layer, for me, it's where AI can really shine, and it's performance optimization. So instead of just optimizing for like keywords, that still horrifies me that people do that to this day, but get it to predict content performance before publishing. Ask it questions, see if it can forecast. Create dynamic content that adapts based on user behavior. Depending on how you want your user to engage with your website, depending on what your site is, that you may want to present something in different ways. So you could use AI to do that. One of my favorites, and I've definitely talked about this on previous podcasts, but that personalization at scale. You can really be specific to who you're talking to. And you can even build predictive content recommendation systems. So if you can see that your users logged into your website and they are reviewing certain pages, and you're seeing a theme and a trend in that journey, you could then consider how your email marketing to them is positioned. The key point to stress one final time is we're using AI to make our content smarter and more responsive to our audience needs, not just creating AI content. And we must always remember that layer where AI just can't compete. It's not going to replace your experience. That's not doable. Not yet anyway, maybe. But it's not about replacing that human creativity. It's about amplifying it. I think for me, going forward, content strategies that are most successful are going to be ran by people that understand exactly where to use AI and where to keep things human. So if you were to split all my ideas down the middle there, AI, data analysis, content structure and optimization, performance tracking and prediction, basic content adaptation. But then we can still have that added value of the strategic decision making, the emotional storytelling, brand voice and personality, and cultural nuance and context. This comes back to that language I used earlier around matrix. And you can treat this as a bit of an AI matrix, that it can help you find that balance. It can help you decide whether to use AI as a primary tool or just a support tool, or not at all, for the different aspects you're doing of your content strategy. So fantastic news. You've gone through a process. You've got the ideas of content you wanted to create. You've began to apply them. Now we want to start truly measuring those results. And I've already just mentioned there about using AI to do parts of this process. But now we've built this sophisticated content marketing machine, let's hone in on that data. Because for me, so many of the wrong metrics get monitored. There's such a focus on some of these vanity metrics that look good on the reports, look good in the presentations. They don't really tell us anything about real business impact. And coming from the world of SEO, I know from experience that for some of the long drawn out campaigns is I can see impressions growing, but revenue is not. And it is painful. But if you're focusing on the good practice philosophies, those opportunities will come. And then it's about what you do to improve it again and make those things better. Because when you think about it, there is, like us using impressions then as an example, there's no point, but let's convert it into video views. What good is 1 million views if none of those viewers take the next step? What's the real value of high engagement rate if it's not leading to the business growth? We need to shift our focus from what's easy to measure to what actually matters. And you could consider my sort of thoughts here around the metrics hierarchy as a pyramid, essentially. And it can completely change how you measure content success. So layer one straight away is what really matters is the revenue impact. These are the metrics that you want to focus on the most because you know either if you're in the business, as in you're in the marketing team, the sales team, from whatever element of operations you are within the business, you want to have a positive effect on revenue and profit. So for every piece of content in this example, we need to track the revenue influenced, the customer lifetime value impact, the sales cycle, and the customer acquisition costs. And if you haven't yet, I've done a previous podcast around some of these layers as well. So I'm just going to go over these a bit high level today. But these metrics tell us not just whether our content is being consumed, but whether it's actually driving business results. And this is about connecting content directly to the bottom line. And of course, day one of your first post, you're not going to have that data yet. You have to have patience, time, and most importantly, consistency throughout this whole ecosystem. But layer two, the audience building metrics. So hopefully you can see what we're starting to do. We've just talked about that first layer, which is the brass tacks, the numbers. And now we're going to start taking a look at whether we're effectively building a loyal audience. So that could be return visitor rates on your website, content consumption patterns. So we could see that a user has gone from this piece of content to this piece of content, this piece of content, or this page to page to page. Even share of voice in your industry. There's lots of different tools out there where you can begin to gather that sort of data. But even community, or one of the easy ones to go to for me is that community engagement depth. It's go and take a look at all your content. Go and even just your socials, your personal LinkedIn, let's say. Go and see who's engaging in that content. Are there trends? It doesn't take you long to run through them. You'll see identified trends in individuals step by step. And what's fascinating here is tracking the sequence of content consumption, as an example, is often more valuable than tracking the individual piece performance. We know that different platforms like different volumes of content and all those pieces. But understanding how people move through your content tells you far more than simply knowing how many people viewed each piece. And then that final third layer is the content performance metrics. So these are the tactical metrics that you may have heard before, but with a little twist. So things like engagement time, not just page views, but actually how long do people spend engaging with your content? That could be a web page. That could be how long. So for example, in Meta ads, tracking how long people watch your video for. What are those average times? You can really delve into this data. So things for me like scroll depth patterns, so how far physically are users scrolling down a web page? And the same with the interaction mapping process as well. Tools like Hotjar or Microsoft Clarity. You can go and see and collect free data to understand how people interact with your website. And the key difference with this is we're measuring the quality of the engagement and not just the quantity. A 3-minute focused read is worth more than 10 surface level page views. I appreciate we've covered a heck of a lot of ground today. So from rethinking our fundamental approach to content strategy to exploring how we measure that success. But I want to leave you with something practical that you can go and implement right now, today, that will start making a difference in your content marketing immediately. If you could do anything for me, take 30 minutes today, start building your question bank. Open a fresh document and gather every customer question you can find from your email, your social media comments, your team's conversation with clients, anywhere your customers are asking questions. Don't organize them, just collect them. The patterns you'll start to see in these questions will transform how you think about your content. You'll begin to notice the emotional states we talked about, the frustration, the skepticism, the overwhelm, the need for validation. This understanding will influence every piece of content you create going forward. Just remember, content marketing isn't just about being seen, it's about being understood. And it's not about how much content you create, but about how deeply that content resonates with your audience. And every piece of content you put out in the world is an opportunity to show your audience that you truly understand their challenges, their aspirations, and their journey. Now, just before we wrap up, I want to ask you a favor. If you found today's episode of any value, if something I've shared has sparked an idea or made you think differently about your content strategy, I'd be really grateful if you could share this with just one person that you think would benefit from it as well. They might be struggling with these same content marketing challenges. You see, I believe that great marketing isn't about tricks and hacks. It's about creating genuine value and building real connections. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can do is share knowledge with others who might benefit from it. So if you know someone who's trying to make their content work harder for their business, please send them a link to this episode. Thanks for listening to Marketing Unzipped. I'm Rob Curtis, and thanks for giving me your time and attention. If you want to carry on the conversation, drop a message in the comment sections, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear about your content marketing journey and the insights you're discovering along the way. And just remember, great marketing isn't about working harder. It's about working smarter and creating genuine connections with your audience. Until next time, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and most importantly, keep unzipping the possibilities in your marketing.